The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the penthouse, spraying crystal shards across Damien's Italian leather shoes. Annie stood in the doorway, her worn canvas bag slung over her shoulder, watching the man who once made her feel like nothing now crumbling before her eyes. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking in a way she'd never heard before. "Annie, please. I'll change. I swear I'll change." But she'd heard those words before, whispered between apologies that never lasted, promises that dissolved like sugar and rain. This time she didn't flinch. This time she didn't stay. "No, Damien," she said, her voice steady as steel. "You had me when I was everything. You don't get me now that I'm something." The door closed behind her with a finality that echoed through the empty penthouse, and for the first time in 3 years, Annie walked away from the man who taught her that love, without respect, is just another word for slavery. Before we dive deeper into how Annie transformed from the girl who cleaned a billionaire's shoes to the woman who walked away from his empire, hit that like button and subscribe. You'll want to see how a cobbler's daughter rewrote her entire destiny. Trust me, this story will change how you see love, worth, and power forever. 2 years earlier, Annie was nobody. At least, that's what the mirror whispered every morning when she tied her hair back for another shift at the Grand Meridian Hotel. She was 24, the first and only daughter of Ben Sebastian, a cobbler whose hands were permanently stained with leather dye and shoe polish. Her mother, Michelle, lay in a care facility across town, her body weakened by a stroke that had stolen her speech and left half her face frozen in permanent stillness. The medical bills arrived like clockwork every month, reminders that love came with a price Annie could barely afford. Their 2-room apartment felt emptier now, haunted not by death, but by the slow, cruel erasure of the woman who used to hum while braiding Annie's hair. Annie worked 3 jobs, seamstress by day, usher at high society events by night, and weekend market vendor selling the dresses she stitched by lamplight. She was exhausted. She was invisible, and she was hungry, not for food, but for something more, something she couldn't name. The night she met Damien Ashford, she was working as an usher at the Kingsley Foundation Gala. Women dripped in diamonds, swept past her like she was furniture. Men in tuxedos that cost more than her annual rent didn't even meet her eyes. She was handing out programs when she noticed him. Tall, sharp-jawed, with eyes like frozen amber. He stood near the champagne tower, adjusting his cufflinks with the ease of someone who'd never questioned whether he belonged. Then his button popped. The small gold button from his tuxedo jacket pinged across the floor and rolled to a stop near Annie's worn flats. He looked down at it, then at her, his expression caught between embarrassment and irritation. Most people would have walked away, but Annie had been raised by a man who believed broken things deserved fixing. She knelt, picked up the button, and said, "I can fix that for you. I have a sewing kit." Damien blinked, as if noticing her for the first time. "You carry a sewing kit to a gala?" "I carry it everywhere," Annie replied, already threading a needle she kept tucked in her small waist pouch. "You never know when something might fall apart." He watched in silence as her fingers moved with practiced precision, stitching the button back in place within 90 seconds. When she finished, she looked up at him and smiled. Good as new. "What's your name?" he asked. "Annie." "Damien." He extended his hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm. "Thank you, Annie. You just saved me from a very embarrassing evening." She expected him to walk away. Instead, he stayed. They talked in whispers between her usher duties, about her sewing, his tech investments, her father's cobbler shop, his childhood and boarding schools. When the gala ended, he asked for her number. 3 days later, he took her to dinner. 2 months later, he kissed her under the city lights and told her she was different from anyone he'd ever met. 6 months later, she moved into his penthouse, believing she'd finally found someone who saw her. But love has a way of blinding you to the cracks forming beneath your feet. At first, it was small comments. "You don't need to wear that dress, babe. It looks homemade." Or, "Maybe skip dessert tonight. You've been stress eating." Or, my friends are coming over. Could you maybe not mention your father's shop? It's just awkward. Enid laughed them off. She told herself Damien was trying to help her fit into his world. She cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, polished his shoes until they gleamed. She organized his schedule, entertained his business partners, and smiled through dinners where his friends talked about her like she wasn't there. She's cute, Damien, but is she, sophisticated enough for your circle? One woman asked. Damien had laughed. She's learning, he'd said, as if Annie were a pet he was training. The body shaming came next. You've gained weight, haven't you? He'd say casually, pinching her waist. I'm just looking out for you, Annie. Image matters in my world. She started skipping meals. She avoided mirrors. She wore oversized clothes to hide the body she'd once loved. And still, she stayed. Because somewhere deep inside, she believed that if she just loved him hard enough, sacrificed enough, became small enough, he would finally see her worth. But the worst part wasn't the insults. It was the comparisons. My ex was a model, he'd say during arguments. She never embarrassed me at events. Or, your father is a cobbler, Annie, a cobbler. Do you know how that sounds when people ask about your family? She wanted to scream that her father was a man of honor, that his calloused hands had built her entire world, but the words died in her throat because Damien had convinced her that loving him meant erasing herself. One evening, after Damien berated her in front of his colleagues for mispronouncing a wine vintage, Annie locked herself in the bathroom and cried until her ribs ached. When she emerged, hollow-eyed and trembling, she knew she needed help. But not from friends. They'd long since stopped calling, tired of hearing her give excuses for wanting to leave him. Not from therapists. She couldn't afford them. She needed wisdom. She needed her father. Ben's cobbler shop smelled like leather and dust. When Enid walked in, her father looked up from the shoe he was mending, and his face crumpled. My daughter, he whispered, what has he done to you? Enid tried to explain. The love, the pain, the confusion. Ben listened without interrupting. When she finished, he set down his tools and said, Let me tell you a story. He spoke of a young bird who fell in love with a lion. The bird was so enchanted by the lion's roar, his golden mane, his power, that she forgot she had wings. She spent her days grooming his fur, fetching his meals, singing to soothe his temper. But the lion, magnificent as he was, never once looked up at the sky and wondered what it felt like to fly. One day, an old eagle landed near the bird and asked, Why do you crawl when you were born to soar? The bird replied, Because the lion needs me. The eagle said, No, child. The lion needs a servant. You need yourself. Annie's breath caught. Papa, Ben took her hands. Enid, my daughter, love should make you bigger, not smaller. If a man needs you to shrink so he can feel tall, he is not a man. He is a boy playing king. And you, my beautiful girl, were never meant to be someone's footstool. The parable shattered something inside her. Or perhaps it healed something she'd thought was permanently broken. That night, Annie returned to the penthouse. Damien was on the phone, laughing about a deal he'd closed. When he hung up, she said, We need to talk. He barely looked up. Can it wait? I'm exhausted. No, Enid said. It can't. She told him she was leaving. His reaction was immediate. Shock, then anger, then dismissive laughter. You're leaving me. Enid, where will you go? Back to your father's cobbler shop? You have nothing without me. I have myself, she replied, and that's more than I had with you. You'll come crawling back, he sneered. When reality hits, when your mother's medical bills pile up. Oh wait, she's almost dead. When it's your birthday and no one throws you a surprise party. When you realize no one else will ever want you. Then I'll want myself, Annie interrupted, and that will be enough. She walked out with nothing but her sewing kit and her father's words ringing in her ears. Damien didn't follow. He believed his own prophecy, that she'd return, broken and desperate, begging for his mercy. Her best friends, Angel and Abigail, believed it, too. "Eni, you're making a huge mistake," Kamsi had said over the phone. "Do you know how many women would kill to be with Damien Ashford?" When Eni refused to reconsider, they stopped answering her calls. Money, she learned, bought loyalty faster than love ever could. The first month was brutal. Eni's mother, not dead but suffering from a stroke in a care facility Damien had promised to help fund, needed medication. Her birthday came and went without celebration. Damien's silence was deafening, strategic. He was waiting, but Eni was done waiting for a man to define her worth. She pitched her seamstress designs to 12 investors. 11 rejected her. The 12th, a woman named Miriam who'd built her own fashion empire, said, "I see hunger in you. Let's talk." Eni applied for grants, was denied 8 times, and approved on the 9th. She joined entrepreneurship groups, hired a business mentor named Bella, who taught her that resilience wasn't about never falling, it was about refusing to stay down. She poured every waking hour into her brand, Eni Originals, custom garments for women who refuse to shrink. 6 months later, her designs went viral after a popular influencer wore one of her pieces. A year later, she opened her first boutique. 18 months later, she was profiled in Forbes Africa as one of the continent's rising fashion moguls. Her empire wasn't built on inherited wealth or lucky breaks. It was built on the shattered pieces of a girl who learned that the only approval she needed was her own. And then Damien called. Not once, not twice, 27 times in 1 week. When she finally answered, his voice was unfamiliar, small, pleading. "Eni, I made a mistake. I was an idiot. I need you." "No," she said simply. "You need a trophy. I'm not for sale anymore." He showed up at her boutique, at her father's shop, at her apartment. Each time she turned him away because she'd learned the hardest lesson love can teach. The person who makes you beg for crumbs will never appreciate the feast you become. Now Damien stands in front of her, shattered champagne at his feet, asking for something he threw away when he had it. And Eni, daughter of a cobbler, builder of empires, woman who learned to fly, feels nothing but peace. But here's the question that haunts every ending. What if the person who broke you is the only one who truly knows how to put you back together? Or is walking away the only way to prove they never held the pieces that mattered? If any story moved you, if you've ever loved someone who made you feel small, or if you're building your empire from the ashes of a broken heart, then this video was made for you. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment so that we all learn. And if you have ever walked away from someone everyone said you should keep, your story matters. Share it below, because someone reading this needs to know they're not alone. And keep your notification on so you don't miss our next story.